Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. On Monday, we had barbecue pulled pork sandwiches. I actually did not make this. One of Josh's friends sent us some of this. He cooks his pork in a smoker and then makes his own barbecue sauce. It is so good. I had it in my freezer, so I just pulled that out and reheated it, and I served it on a bun. And then for the side, I made some Greek yogurt mac and cheese. This is so delicious, so simple, and I'm going to show you how I do it. So I just boil my water and I add a cup of elbow macaroni noodles, and I do salt the water. You can easily double or triple this recipe. Meanwhile, while the water is boiling, I shred up some sharp cheddar cheese, and then in a little sauce pot, I add a quarter cup of milk, and then I add in a cup of that shredded cheese, and then I season it with salt and pepper, and I just let the cheese melt over medium-low heat. And then once that is melted, I add in a quarter cup of plain Greek yogurt. And then once that is combined, you just throw in your noodles, and that is it. This is so flavorful in my opinion, and I know it's not necessarily healthy, but it's a lot lighter than a lot of mac and cheeses. On Tuesday, I made some creamy chicken enchiladas. So I'm just starting off with a rotisserie chicken that I took the skin off of, and I removed the chicken from the bones, and I just shredded it up. So here I'm about to assemble the enchiladas. So I'm just using some medium flour tortillas. And then I'm going to be using some extra sharp cheddar cheese. And then I'm just going to put all of these in an ungreased 9x13 baking dish. So now I'm going to get started on the sauce that gets poured over top of the enchiladas. So to my sauce pot, I'm going to be adding a couple tablespoons of butter. And then once that is melted, I'm going to add in a couple tablespoons of flour. And I'm just going to stir that and let it cook for a couple of minutes. And then I just add in 2 cups of chicken broth, and I'm going to be adding in a mix of sour cream and plain Greek yogurt. You can use either or, but I was just trying to finish up what I had in my fridge. And I will be leaving the recipe in the description box so that you can get the exact measurements. But I'm just going to whisk this sour cream mixture into the chicken broth, and once it is a smooth sauce, I'm going to be adding in a cup of shredded cheese. So once that cheese is fully melted into the sauce, I just take it and pour it all over the top of the enchiladas, and then I top it with some more cheese. And then I'm going to be popping it in my oven at 350 for 35 minutes. And here it is, straight out of the oven. It is bubbly and delicious. We love this recipe. I've made it at least a handful of times. So I served it with my homemade Mexican rice. And if you are new here, I do have a whole recipe video on this rice. I make it all the time. So I will definitely link that in the description box and up in the cards. The next day, we had that leftover Mexican rice, and I just made some simple beef tacos. I am using the nacho and cheese Dorito shells. We love these. And I just put cheese and some taco sauce on mine, and that was our easy peasy Wednesday dinner. On Thursday, I made some crispy Parmesan chicken with some zucchini and roasted potatoes. Stick around and I will show you how I did it. So for the potatoes, I just scrubbed and washed them really well. I'm using yellow potatoes here because that's what I had, but I just sliced them and diced them into little bite-sized pieces, and then I tossed them into a big bowl, and then I drizzle with some olive oil. For the seasonings, I'm just using garlic, salt, and pepper. And then I just stir to coat every piece of potato. And then I just pour them onto a greased baking sheet and kind of spread them out so that they'll cook evenly. And then I put them in my oven at 450 for 30 minutes. And then next I get started on my chicken and zucchini. So first I just wash off my zucchini, and then I slice it up. And then I set it to the side and wash off my cutting board. And then I have my 2 chicken breasts, and I'm just trimming off all the fat, and then I'm going to be slicing each breast in half so that I will have 4 thinner pieces. Next, I just add a couple of tablespoons of butter to my skillet, and while that is melting, I go ahead and bread up my chicken. So in the plate is some flour, and then in the second one is a beaten egg, and then in the bowl I have a mix of Italian breadcrumbs and some fresh grated Parmesan cheese. So I take each piece of chicken and I first dip it into the flour, and then I dunk it into the beaten egg, and the recipe actually calls to dip it into melted butter, but going off of the reviews, a lot of people said that it didn't stick, so I just substituted the egg for the butter. But after that, I just dip it into the breadcrumb and Parmesan mix, and I just kind of press it into the chicken so that it gets coated really well. And I just repeat that, and I put them all in my skillet. Then I just let them cook for a few minutes on each side, and that will depend on the thickness of your chicken. But once it is fully cooked, I remove that to a separate plate. At this point, Josh had already snatched one. But then I just toss in a couple more tablespoons of butter to my skillet. And then I add in some minced garlic, and I just let that saute for a few minutes. And then I add back in that zucchini that I sliced up earlier, and I just season it with salt and pepper and cook it until it is tender, and that is it. Here I'm making a tortellini bake, so I'm just using the frozen cheese tortellini, and I'm just tossing that whole bag into a big bowl. And then I'm going to be adding in a whole jar of Alfredo sauce, and then I'm just going to stir all that together. And then I'm going to add in a half a jar of Prego spaghetti sauce. And then I just stir that in as well. And the recipe actually says to cook your tortellini first before adding in the sauce, but I just skipped that step and threw it in frozen, and I just doubled my baking time, and it turned out great. But I just took an 8x8 baking dish and I sprayed it with some Pam, and then I added in the tortellini with all of the sauces, and I just spread it out a little bit. And then I topped it with some Parmesan cheese and mozzarella, and I put it in my oven at 350 for 30 minutes. And then I flipped my broiler on for a few minutes just so that the top can get nice and brown the way that we like it, and that is it. And this was so delicious, guys. Even Josh, who is a big meat eater, absolutely loved this, and as you've seen, it couldn't be simpler, so it's definitely a keeper. I served it with a side salad with just lettuce, some shredded carrots, cheese, croutons, and ranch, and that was our dinner for Friday. On Saturday, I made a bacon cheeseburger soup. So first, I took a pound of ground beef and browned it up. I did season it with salt and pepper, and then I drained it to the side and wiped down my skillet. I also cooked some bacon in the oven. The recipe actually called for a pound of bacon. I thought that was way too much, so I just filled up my bacon sheet and stopped there. To that same skillet that I cooked the ground beef in, I added some butter, and then I added in some shredded carrots along with some dried basil and dried parsley. The recipe called for onions and celery, but I left those out. But I just sauteed those carrots until they were tender. And then I added back in that ground beef, and I also added in 4 cups of potatoes. I'm using a mix of russet and yellow potatoes. And then I'm going to be adding 3 cups of chicken broth. And then I just kind of combine that, and I pat it down so that everything is coated into that liquid. And then I let that come up to a boil. And then I turn the heat down, pop a lid on, and I let it cook for about 12 minutes until your potatoes are tender. While the potatoes are cooking, I go ahead and shred up a whole block of sharp cheddar cheese. You can use any cheese that you prefer, but this is what we like. And then in this little saucepan, I start making a little roux, which is going to be a thickener for the soup. So I just melt some butter, and then I add in some flour, and I let that cook for a few minutes until it gets nice and bubbly. And then I'm just going to be adding that into the soup after those potatoes are tender. And then I just stir everything together, and I let it come up to a boil and let that cook for a few minutes. Then I turn my heat down to low, and I add in some milk, heavy cream, salt, pepper, and that shredded cheese. And then I just stir everything together, and when that cheese is fully melted into the soup, I take my bacon that I have drained, and I just crumble it and add it back into the soup. And then for the final step, I just add in some plain Greek yogurt, or you can use sour cream. And once that gets fully combined, it is done. I topped mine with some extra pepper, cheese, and bacon, and this was just so yummy. I love soups, and this is kind of like a potato soup, which is one of my favorites, but with a bacon cheeseburger twist, so it was so good. And then I just served it with a Sister Schubert roll. On Sunday, we went out to eat at A&W. That was our very first time eating there, and we loved it. But that wraps up this week. I hope you enjoyed the video and got some ideas. I upload these What's for Dinner videos every Monday, so if you don't want to miss out, be sure to tap that subscribe button. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope that each and every one of you have a wonderful week. I will see you all next time. Bye!